I'm Linda Carter, 52, a single mother who spent her life working 3 jobs so my daughter could have everything. I thought I had seen every betrayal life could throw at me. Until at my daughter's beach wedding in Miami, I heard her fiancé smirk and say, "Pay us $50,000 or vanish forever." My daughter added, her voice cold as the ocean breeze, or "Enjoy a lonely nursing home, Mom." I took a slow sip of champagne, looked them dead in the eyes and whispered, "You forgot one thing." Their faces turned pale. Moments later, chaos erupted, and I didn't lift a finger. At my daughter's beach wedding in Miami, her fiancé walked up to me with a glass of champagne and demanded $50,000 if I wanted to stay in her life as her mother. The ocean breeze was warm, carrying the soft scent of salt and coconut sunscreen across the resort patio. The sunset cast a golden glow over the white chairs lined up on the sand, each tied with pale pink ribbons that fluttered against the breeze. I stood there in my best department store dress, the pale blue fabric catching the light as I smoothed it down over my hips, willing my hands to stop shaking. Chase Thompson, 33, tall, with neatly styled dark hair and a crisp white linen suit, lifted his glass toward me like we were sharing a private joke. His smile was pleasant enough, but his eyes were cold, assessing, waiting for a reaction. "Linda," he said, rolling my name around like he was already tired of using it. "We need to talk about your contribution." My stomach tightened, but I kept my eyes steady on his, careful not to let him see the storm building beneath my calm expression. "Contribution?" I asked, my voice even soft enough so the guests nearby wouldn't overhear. Madeline, my daughter, just 28 and glowing in her rehearsal dress, stepped closer, her diamond earrings catching the last rays of sunlight. She glanced at Chase, then back at me, her lips pressing into a thin line I recognized from when she was a teenager asking for gas money. "It's just to help with the final costs," Chase continued, swirling his champagne as if he were bored. "50,000 should be enough to keep everything looking appropriate for the family." I blinked, trying to process the words, the audacity wrapped in that polished voice, the way his gaze slid over me, like I was something to be managed, not someone to be respected. Madeline let out a small sigh, shifting her weight, her eyes scanning the guests milling around the tiki torches and floral centerpieces. "It's not that much, Mom. Either help us or, well, you can enjoy solitude in some old folks' home when this is all over." For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of waves crashing softly behind me, the warm air brushing against my cheek, and the memory of a small girl with skin knees and wild curls running toward me after school shouting, "Mama, you came." Now that little girl was gone, replaced by this woman who looked through me as if I were a burden, an inconvenience to be handled before the dinner speeches. I took a slow sip of the champagne they had handed me earlier, letting the bitterness coat my tongue as I held her gaze. Her face was perfectly made up, her hair pinned into an elegant updo that must have cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and yet there was a flicker in her eyes. A hesitation she quickly tried to hide. I let the silence stretch, feeling the burn in my chest calm into something cold, clear, and sharp. "You forgot one thing," I whispered, leaning in just enough that the words slipped between us like a quiet promise. Chase's smile faltered, the corners of his mouth twitching as he processed the words, and Madeline's eyes widened, confusion mixing with the first taste of fear. I stepped back, raised my glass one last time, and turned away, letting the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses wash over me as I walked toward the edge of the sand. My feet sank slightly into the cool grains, and the soft hush of the waves drowned out the hum of the crowd behind me. They had no idea what was coming next. I kept walking, letting the soft hiss of the waves fill my ears, grounding me against the chaos I had just left behind. My heels sank into the sand, each step deliberate, reminding me that I was still here, still standing, no matter how they tried to push me aside. A small tiki torch flickered as I passed, the flame dancing in the breeze, casting shadows across the path back to the resort's main patio. Behind me, I could hear Madeline's laughter, forced and sharp, trying to cover the awkward silence Chase's demand had left hanging in the air. They thought I would be too embarrassed to say no. They thought they could corner me into writing a check. I could never afford that. I would stay quiet and grateful for a place at the back table. I paused near the edge of the boardwalk, watching the ocean swallow the sun. For a moment, the water turned to liquid gold, waves catching the last light before darkness claimed them. I closed my eyes and let the breeze lift my hair, remembering the days when Madeline would stand next to me on the beach, her small hand gripping mine as she squealed at the cold water. A soft buzz in my purse pulled me back. I pulled out my phone and saw a message from Donna, my oldest friend, and the only person who knew the truth about what I had been planning. "Let me know when you're ready." I stared at the words, feeling the weight of them, the power I held in my hands, a power I never wanted but knew I would need. Someone cleared their throat behind me. I turned to find a young server holding a tray of empty glasses, her eyes kind soft. "Ma'am, would you like another drink?" she asked. I smiled, shaking my head. "No, thank you. You're doing a great job tonight." Her eyes lit up and she nodded before walking away, her ponytail swinging behind her. I watched her disappear into the crowd, wondering how many nights her mother had stayed awake waiting for her to come home safe. I slipped my phone back into my purse and turned toward the patio, taking in the strings of fairy lights wrapped around the palm trees, the soft hum of a string quartet playing near the bar, the clusters of guests in expensive dresses and tailored suits. They moved with ease, comfortable in this world of open bars and catered hors d'oeuvres, never pausing to see the staff clearing plates, never noticing the women in the kitchen working double shifts so they could afford their kids' textbooks. Chase was near the bar, speaking to one of his groomsmen, his laughter ringing out, practiced and hollow. Madeline stood beside him, sipping her champagne, her eyes darting around the crowd, her hand resting on her stomach for just a moment before she dropped it, her face smoothing into the perfect bride's smile. She didn't know I had seen that small gesture, the way she flinched when Chase's hand gripped her elbow a little too tightly when she had spilled a few drops of wine on her dress earlier. They both looked up as I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the stone, my face calm. "Mom," Madeline said, her voice warm but strained. "Enjoying yourself?" I nodded, looking her straight in the eyes. "Beautiful evening." Chase's smile was back, thin and smug. "I hope you've had time to think about our discussion." I tilted my head slightly, studying him. The way he stood, feet apart, chin lifted, expecting me to crumble, expecting me to beg for a place in their new world. Instead, I took a slow breath, letting the air settle in my lungs before I spoke. I said softly, letting the words hang there just long enough. His eyebrows lifted, and for a moment I saw a flicker of triumph cross his face. "Good," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket for a business card. "Because we'll need that check by Monday. It's best to handle these things quickly." Madeline glanced at me, her eyes searching, but I didn't look away. I leaned in just enough so they could hear me over the music, my voice quiet, steady. "You forgot one thing." The color drained from Chase's face and Madeline's hand trembled, nearly spilling her drink as she lowered the glass. Before they could respond, I turned away, walking back into the warm night, the music swelling around me, the soft clinking of glasses blending with the hush of the waves. They had no idea what I was capable of. No idea what was coming next. What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Before they demanded money from me, they forgot everything I had already given away. It was raining the night I left Boston with Madeline in my arms. She was 3 with tangled curls sticking to her damp cheeks, her small fingers clutching my jacket as I stepped onto the last bus out of Dorchester. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, saying nothing as I dug for coins with shaking hands, sliding them across the cold metal tray. I remember the sound of the rain hitting the windows as we pulled away, each drop like a promise I made to myself. I would give her a life better than this, better than the shouting and the broken glass, better than hiding in a locked bathroom until the storm passed. The apartment I found was the size of a closet, a one-room unit above a laundromat that smelled of bleach and stale air. But it had a deadbolt and a small window that let in the morning sun, and for a moment that was enough. I worked mornings at a diner on Tremont Street, pouring coffee for men in suits and college students half asleep over textbooks. I scrubbed office floors at night in Back Bay, the sound of vacuums humming like a lullaby when the buildings were empty. On weekends I watched kids for other mothers who needed a break, rocking babies to sleep while my own daughter played quietly in the corner with a stuffed rabbit we found at a church sale. Every dollar I could spare I tucked into an envelope under the loose floorboard by the window, each bill a small hope folded and hidden for later. Madeline grew, her knees always scraped from the playground, her eyes bright when she brought home spelling tests with stars on them. She loved stories, begging me to read to her at night even when I came home too tired to stand, my feet swollen from hours on the diner floor. "Just one more, Mama," she would whisper, her head resting on my arm as I read, my voice hoarse but steady. When she turned 10, I opened a small savings account at the local credit union, sliding in $20 at a time, sometimes only $5, but always something. It was for her future, for the life I promised her that night on the bus. She worked hard in school just like I did at my jobs, and the day she got her acceptance letter to NYU, she screamed so loud the neighbor downstairs came up to check if we were okay. "Mama, I did it," she cried, waving the envelope, tears streaming down her face. I hugged her, breathing in the scent of her hair, letting her joy wash over me as I hid the fear in my chest. NYU was expensive, more than I could ever imagine, but she had earned it and I would find a way. At night, I lay awake calculating numbers, planning extra shifts, thinking of what I could sell, what bills I could delay. Every part of me believed she deserved this chance, and I would not let money be what stopped her. The day we moved her into her small dorm in Manhattan, she hugged me tight, promising to call every day. She decorated her room with thrift store finds and pinned up pictures of us on the wall, our smiles wide, our arms wrapped around each other, at the beach, at the park. At every small moment we celebrated as victories. She loved fashion, talking about fabrics and lines, showing me sketches she drew between classes. She would call late at night, excited, telling me about a new idea, a small boutique she dreamed of owning one day. "It will be beautiful, Mama," she said. "I'll make you proud." "You already have, baby," I told her, pressing the phone to my ear, closing my eyes so she wouldn't hear the tears in my voice. And when she came home after graduation, her eyes shining with plans, asking if she could take a small space in Beacon Hill for her boutique, I knew what I had to do. I went to the credit union and closed my retirement account, watching as they counted out $120,000, money I had spent my life collecting dollar by dollar, shift by shift. I handed it to her without hesitation, watching her hug me, her voice trembling as she promised, "I won't let you down, Mama." And I believed her. I didn't know then that sometimes dreams have a price, one you don't see until it's too late. Madeline's boutique opened on a rainy Saturday morning in Beacon Hill, the kind of soft drizzle that made the sidewalks shine like glass. I stood by the front window, watching her adjust the display of vintage scarves and handmade jewelry she had curated with so much care. She wore a simple white blouse and black slacks, her hair tied back in a loose knot, a few strands framing her excited, tired face. She turned to me, her eyes bright. "We did it, Mama," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Yes, baby, you did," I whispered, reaching out to tuck a curl behind her ear. That first day, only a few customers trickled in, neighborhood women with coffee cups in hand, curious about the new shop on the corner. I watched Madeline greet each one with her soft, confident voice, showing them the racks of dresses, telling stories about the designers, explaining how each piece was chosen. The register barely rang that day, but her smile never faded. That night, I stayed behind to help her sweep the floors, folding scarves and straightening racks, while she counted the small stack of bills in the register. "It's a start," she said, trying to sound brave. "It's a beautiful start," I assured her, touching her shoulder lightly. Days turned into weeks, and slowly word spread about Madeline's attic. An influencer from Boston stumbled in one afternoon, fell in love with a hand-sewn blue coat, and posted a photo online. The next morning, there was a line down the block. Madeline called me breathless, telling me she needed help with inventory, and I rushed over from my early shift at the diner. I stood behind the counter, carefully folding dresses into paper bags, watching her shine as she moved among the customers, her laughter ringing out like music. Sometimes I would catch her looking at me, her eyes softening, and I would see the little girl who once held my hand on the walk home from school. Those moments were enough to keep me going, even when my feet ached and my hands shook from the double shifts. The boutique grew quickly, and Madeline's confidence grew with it. She started meeting with local designers, attending small shows, and planning pop-up events to bring in new clients. She would call me late at night, excited about a new supplier or a fabric she had found, her voice dancing through the phone as I lay on my worn couch, eyes heavy but heart light. "Mama, I can't believe this is real," she would say. "It's real because you made it real," I would tell her. Then one day she called to say she had met someone. His name was Chase Thompson, from a wealthy Boston family with a smile that could light up a room and a confidence that made people lean in when he spoke. "He believes in me, Mama," she said, her voice glowing. "That's wonderful, baby," I said, though I felt a quiet worry settle in my chest. The first time I met Chase, he shook my hand firmly, his eyes sharp, scanning me quickly before offering a polite smile. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit, expensive watch on his wrist, shoes polished to a mirror shine. "Linda, it's a pleasure," he said, holding eye contact just a moment too long. Madeline clung to his arm, looking up at him with admiration, her eyes bright, her laughter softer when he was near. They started planning a future together, speaking of expansion, of moving the boutique to New York, of blending dreams and ambitions into something bigger. And slowly I started to notice the way she looked at me changing. Less like a daughter who saw her mother as the center of her world, and more like a woman tolerating a reminder of the life she wanted to leave behind. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just part of her growing up, finding her own path, but each time she glanced at me with that polite, distracted smile, it felt like a small cut, a reminder that I had spent my life giving her everything only to watch her drift further away. Then one afternoon, as I was folding dresses behind the counter, I heard her talking to Chase near the register. "She's just not used to this world," Madeline said, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. I froze, the fabric soft in my hands, the words sinking in deeper than I expected. Chase chuckled softly. "She'll learn, Maddie. Or she won't." I set the dress down and stepped outside, letting the cold Boston air sting my cheeks, breathing in deeply to steady myself. That was the moment I realized the look in Madeline's eyes was no longer pride or gratitude. It was pity. Have you ever felt someone you loved drift away while you stood still? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I didn't just invest in my daughter's dream. I protected her future even when she didn't know. Donna had always been the one person I could call without hesitation, no matter the hour. We met years ago when she was fighting for custody of her own kids, and I let her crash on my couch until she found her footing. Now, at 55, she was a sharp-eyed paralegal working at a small but tough Boston law firm. When I told her I was giving Madeline the money to open Madeline's attic, she didn't celebrate right away. She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her notebook, her brown eyes studying me. "Linda, I know you want her to have this," she said quietly. "But you need to protect yourself too." "I'm not worried about me," I told her. "It's not just about you," she replied, her voice firm. "If anything goes wrong with the business, you'll be liable for debt, taxes, lawsuits, everything. Let me set up a structure. You'll hold 51%. Silent ownership. She can run the place, but you'll protect her if anything happens." I hesitated, thinking of Madeline's face when she talked about her boutique, the way she believed in her dream with her whole heart. "She'll hate me if she finds out," I whispered. "She doesn't need to find out," Donna said. "This isn't about control. It's about protection." That night I signed the papers. Donna prepared, my hands trembling as I held the pen. I told myself it was the right thing, the only way to keep Madeline safe from the world's sharp edges. The early months of Madeline's attic were harder than either of us expected. Sales were slow, rent was high, and the electricity bill seemed to double every month. Madeline tried to hide her fear, but I saw it in the way she chewed her lip while checking the register, the way her shoulders slumped after a quiet day. So I helped, quietly. I paid half the rent for 6 months, slipping the money into the landlord's mailbox late at night, so Madeline wouldn't know. I dropped off bags of groceries under the guise of extras from work and paid for small repairs when a pipe burst in the tiny bathroom. Then one Friday afternoon, everything changed. An influencer from Boston, a young woman named Sierra, walked in looking for a coat for a fall shoot. She tried on a blue wool piece Madeline had sourced from a small local designer and posted a photo to her page, tagging Madeline's attic. The next morning, there was a line outside the shop before Madeline even unlocked the door. I watched from across the street, a coffee cup warm in my hands, as my daughter rushed to greet customers, her face flushed with excitement. She called me that night, her voice shaking with joy. "Mama, we sold out of the new stock. People love it. They really love it. I'm so proud of you, baby," I told her, meaning every word. The boutique took off after that, becoming a small local gem in Beacon Hill. Madeline was invited to pop-up markets, featured in local blogs, and even made a small television spot for a Boston morning show. She started meeting friends for brunch, chatting about the business with bright eyes and eager plans, telling them how she built it from the ground up, how she found the courage to take the leap. Sometimes when I joined her for coffee, she would talk about her plans with a spark I adored, but there were moments when her eyes would slide past me, her smile faltering as if she remembered I didn't quite fit into this new world she was so building. I told myself it didn't matter, that seeing her happy was enough. Then she met Chase Thompson. Tall, confident, with the easy charm of a man who never had to worry about the price of rent or the hours on a paycheck. He showed up at the boutique one day with flowers and took Madeline out for coffee. The next week they were inseparable. The first time I met him, he was polite, shaking my hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Linda, it's great to finally meet you," he said. Madeline clung to his arm, looking up at him like he was the answer to every prayer she had ever whispered. And for a while I let myself believe he might be. But I should have listened to the small, cold worry in my chest that day. Because everything was about to change again. Madeline fell for Chase quickly, the way young women do when a man makes big promises and backs them with easy smiles. I watched her fall in love with the way he opened doors for her, the way he spoke about their future like it was already written. He started spending more time at the boutique, giving advice no one asked for, suggesting new systems for inventory, hinting that he knew people who could help them expand faster. Madeline listened, nodding, eyes wide, eager to please him. "He just wants to help us grow, Mama," she told me one evening as we packed up after closing. She was folding dresses, her hands moving quickly, her mind somewhere else. "Make sure it's your decision, Maddie," I said softly, tying up a bag of trash. She looked at me, her lips pressing together, a flicker of something in her eyes that I couldn't name. "I know what I'm doing," she replied, her voice calm but distant. I let it go, even though something inside me didn't feel right. A few weeks later, Madeline started talking about New York again, about moving the boutique, finding investors, taking the brand to a bigger stage. Chase stood behind her at dinner, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes watching me carefully. "It's the next logical step," he said. "Madeline's attic has potential. It just needs the right push." "And the right investors, I suppose?" I asked, forcing a small smile. "Exactly," Chase said, flashing those perfect teeth. "You get it." Madeline didn't notice the way his hand tightened on her shoulder or the way his eyes hardened when I didn't nod fast enough. She was too busy dreaming about bright lights and big windows, racks of clothes under spotlights, her name on a neon sign. That night after they left, I sat at my small kitchen table, the quiet of my apartment pressing in around me. I pulled out the paperwork Donna had given me, flipping through the pages that said I still held 51%. Silent ownership. Protection. I ran my finger along the signature line where I had signed my name, remembering why I had done it, why I needed to keep this promise to the little girl who used to run home to me after school, clutching spelling tests with gold stars. My phone buzzed just past midnight. It was Donna. "Need to talk tomorrow. Urgent." I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window, the hum of cars, the occasional shout, the quiet that came just before dawn. At 9 sharp, I walked into Donna's small office near South Station, the bell over the door jingling as I stepped inside. She was already waiting, a file on her desk, her face pale, serious. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. She pushed the file toward me. "I had a contact check something for me like we discussed." I opened the file, my eyes scanning the papers inside. Names I didn't recognize. Numbers. LLC filings. Transfers. "What am I looking at?" I whispered. "Chase," Donna said, her voice low. "He's restructuring the boutique on paper, bringing in outside investors under shell companies. There's money moving, Linda. Large sums, and it's not for inventory or expansion." I felt my stomach drop, the words blurring as I tried to understand. "You're saying he's stealing from her?" I managed. Donna nodded, and using her name to do it. I closed the file slowly, pressing my hand to my forehead, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, forcing the panic back down. "Is it legal?" I asked. Donna's eyes met mine. Technically, he's walking a thin line. But it looks like money laundering, Linda. And if it blows up, they'll come for Madeline. And for you. My hands were cold, trembling as I gripped the edges of the desk. She reached across, covering my hand with hers. That's why we set up your ownership. You can stop this, Linda. Before it's too late. I looked at the file again, the weight of it heavy, the truth crashing into me. Madeline was so in love, so blind, and I was the only one standing between her and the storm she didn't even see coming. I lifted my eyes to Donna's, my voice quiet but certain. Tell me what I need to do. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I found out they didn't just want my money. They wanted me erased from their lives. It was a cold Tuesday morning when I stopped by Madeline's attic to drop off coffee and some fresh bagels. The shop smelled like lavender and cedar, the racks filled with new spring inventory she was so proud of. Madeline was in the back on a call, pacing, her voice low but sharp in that way it was when she spoke to Chase. I set the coffee on the counter and waited, pretending to straighten a row of scarves. Yeah, I know, but she's coming by again, Madeline whispered her back to me. I turned away, pretending not to hear the words sinking into me like ice. When she finally hung up, she forced a smile, thanked me for the coffee, and said she needed to run a quick report for a supplier. She left her laptop open on the counter when she went to the back to grab receipts. I didn't mean to look, but the screen was right there, glowing in the quiet shop. A spreadsheet was open, color-coded and neat, labeled Mom Management. My breath caught my eyes, scanning the headers. Wedding seating chart, talking points. Tasks to keep Linda occupied. Limit her contact with Chase's parents. Schedule vendor meetings during key photo times. I swallowed, blinking hard, my hands gripping the counter so tight my knuckles turned white. They were planning to push me to the edges of Madeline's wedding, to keep me away from important moments, to make sure I was just another guest in the background. I scrolled down, reading the notes. If she resists, use the baby. Remind her it's for appearances. Offer her small tasks to feel included. I heard Madeline's footsteps and closed the laptop, stepping back, forcing my breathing to steady as she walked in with a stack of papers. Everything okay, Mama? She asked, her voice sweet, her smile tight. Everything's fine, I lied, grabbing my purse. I have to get going. As I walked out, the cold Boston air hit me hard and I let it burn, let it wake me up. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my table, staring at the photos on the wall, pictures of Madeline growing up, birthdays with dollar store balloons, school concerts, her first day at NYU. All those years I spent building a life for her, scraping together pennies, working double shifts, believing she would always remember who stood behind her. But she was gone. Replaced by someone who would let a man whisper poison in her ear, who would let him build walls between us, brick by brick, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. The next day, Donna called, her voice urgent. Linda, we have a problem, she said. I got confirmation. Chase moved $150,000 out of the boutique account into a holding company under his name. It's tied to a project called South End Flats. What is that? I asked, gripping the phone. It's a real estate development, she said. They're using your boutique's funds to secure a down payment. If this goes bad, you and Madeline will be liable. My heart pounded, my mouth dry. She doesn't know, does she? No, Donna said quietly. She thinks it's an investment for a New York boutique expansion. Chase told her it was a step toward the future. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. And there's more, Donna continued. I heard from a source that Chase is pressuring Madeline to ask you for more money. Another $50,000. I pressed my hand against my forehead. Why? Because Madeline is pregnant, Donna said softly. And Chase is using it to push her, saying you need to step up as the grandmother if you want to stay involved. I let out a sound I didn't recognize, half laugh, half sob, as the truth settled over me. They weren't just taking my money, they were taking my daughter, my future, my family. I opened my eyes, my voice steady, as I spoke. Donna, tell me exactly what we need to do. Have you ever discovered betrayal from someone you loved the most? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I didn't cry after the call ended. I stood at my window watching the snow falling under the streetlights, flakes drifting down in the yellow glow piling softly on the sidewalk. I thought about Madeline, about the nights she curled up beside me in bed when thunder scared her, how she would clutch her stuffed rabbit and whisper, "It's okay, Mama, I'm brave." I thought about every overnight shift, every dollar folded into an envelope, every promise I made to myself to protect her from the world, even when it meant I had nothing left for me. And now she was letting him use her, letting him dangle that baby as a bargaining chip, letting him erase me from her life with a polite smile and a spreadsheet. I couldn't let that happen. The next morning, I met Donna at her office, the cold Boston wind biting at my face as I stepped inside. She handed me coffee, her eyes tired but sharp. "Linda, I've started drafting paperwork," she said. "But I need you to understand, once we move forward, there's no going back." I nodded, wrapping my cold hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into my skin. "He's using her, Donna. She's too blind to see it." Donna sighed, rubbing her temples, "And if you step in, she may hate you for it." I looked at her steady. "Better she hates me now than loses everything later." She slid a folder across the desk. "These are your rights as majority owner. We can freeze accounts, demand an audit, and legally require Chase to provide all financial documentation. And if he refuses," I asked. "Then we take it to court," she said, "but it will get messy." I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment, picturing Madeline's face when she was 7, losing her first tooth, looking up at me with pride. "She's pregnant, Donna," I whispered. "He's using that baby to keep her in line." Donna's face softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Then we protect her now." Later that day, I went to Madeline's attic, the bell chiming softly as I walked in. Madeline was behind the counter, her face brightening for a moment before she noticed my expression. "Mama, what's wrong?" she asked. I looked around at the shop, at the racks of dresses, the smell of lavender, the quiet hum of the heater fighting against the February chill. "We need to talk, Madeline," I said, keeping my voice calm. She hesitated, glancing toward the back room. "Can it wait? Chase is meeting me for lunch." "No," I said firmly. "Now." She sighed, walking around the counter, folding her arms. "What is it?" I pulled out the paperwork Donna had given me, placing it on the counter. "You need to read this." Her eyes flickered, a shadow crossing her face as she glanced down, then back at me. "What is this, Mama?" she asked, her voice careful. "It's the ownership structure of this boutique," I said. "The one I paid for. The one I've protected for you." She swallowed, her lips tightening. "I know you helped me, but Chase has a plan. A plan that's draining this business dry." I cut in, my voice rising before I pulled it back. "He's using your name to fund his projects. He's putting you and that baby at risk." Madeline flinched, her hand going to her stomach instinctively. "How do you know?" "Because I've been protecting you long before Chase walked into your life," I said softly. "And I'm not stopping now." She looked away, tears welling in her eyes, shaking her head. "You don't understand. He loves me. He wants us to have a future." I stepped closer, placing my hand over hers. "Baby love doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't demand you betray yourself." For a moment, I saw her crumble, the strong, determined woman slipping away to reveal the scared girl I once carried on my hip. Then the door opened, the bell chiming as Chase walked in, his smile freezing when he saw me. "What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Madeline stepped back, wiping her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself. "Nothing," she whispered. But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from themselves? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. They thought they could corner me at my own daughter's wedding. The ocean air smelled like salt and roses as I stepped onto the sand, my thrift store blue dress catching in the breeze. It was the nicest dress I owned, pressed carefully the night before, the color reminding me of the sky on the day Madeline was born. Guests laughed softly under strings of white lights, their heels sinking into the sand, glasses of champagne catching the sunset. I saw Chase's parents near the front, their jewelry flashing, the expensive kind that spoke without words. A server led me to my seat, a table tucked at the far edge of the reception near the dunes, so far back I could barely see the arch where Madeline and Chase would say their vows. The tablecloth was pressed, the flowers fresh, but I knew what this table meant. It meant I was hidden. I sat down, smoothing my dress, lifting my chin as guests filtered in with their designer gowns and tailored suits, greeting each other with polite laughter and air kisses. I caught glimpses of Madeline moving between guests, her wedding dress, a shimmering white lace and silk flowing behind her like a promise. The dress cost $30,000. I knew because she told me once in a quick call, laughing lightly, saying Chase's parents said it's nothing mama, just a drop in the bucket. Once I had dreamed of buying her a dress like that. But dreams change when you're working overnight cleaning offices, counting pennies for rent, saving for a better life you're not even sure you'll live to see. Now she wore that dream and I sat at the back of her wedding waiting to see if she would look for me. She didn't. They came to me after the ceremony, Chase in his crisp suit, Madeline's hand resting on his arm, the diamond on her finger catching the last glow of daylight. Mom, Madeline started, her voice careful, too careful. Can we talk? I stood, the sand shifting beneath my shoes, the breeze lifting her veil around us. Chase spoke before she could continue, his smile, thin, practiced. Linda, we're glad you're here. But there's something we need to discuss. I didn't say a word. I let the silence grow until even the ocean seemed to pause. Chase shifted, clearing his throat. We need you to help with the wedding costs. $50,000. I blinked, my face calm, my heart steady, though I could hear it in my ears. $50,000, I repeated softly. Madeline squeezed his arm, looking away, unable to meet my eyes. It's what families do, Mama. Chase nodded, his eyes cold. It's the price of staying in this family, Linda. I looked past them, seeing the investors. Chase had invited the people who had become partners in Madeline's attic without her understanding the cost, without knowing the woman who had built that dream penny by penny. I saw the way Chase's father laughed with a developer, the way Chase's mother adjusted her pearls, glancing at me once with a look I had seen 1,000 times. Dismissal. I let a slow breath fill my lungs, letting the salt air clear the heaviness that wanted to pull me under. Then I smiled. It wasn't the smile they expected, the small, trembling one of a mother grateful to be allowed a place at the table. It was the smile of a woman who had spent her life surviving. I pulled my phone from my purse, my fingers steady as I typed a message to Donna. Sandcastle time. The message sent the screen going dark as I slipped the phone back into my purse. Madeline's eyes widened, a flicker of confusion passing across her face. Chase frowned, sensing something shift he couldn't see. I took one last look at my daughter standing there in her white dress and turned away, letting the ocean breeze carry me back toward the edge of the dunes. Behind me, my phone buzzed once. Donna's reply was simple. Sent. The wind picked up as I walked toward the edge of the reception, the soft crash of waves steadying the noise in my mind. I paused near a cluster of palm torches, their flames dancing, casting light on the carefully arranged tables, the laughter of people who didn't know their world was about to shift. Madeline's laugh carried above the music light and practiced the same laugh she used when she wanted to impress the world that never saw her struggle. Her hand brushed against Chase's arm as he leaned in, whispering something that made her nod, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope. She didn't know. Not yet. Across the lawn, servers began moving small envelopes in hand, sliding them to guests who checked their names before tearing them open. A murmur rose, soft at first, then louder, confusion turning into sharp questions. Chase's father stood near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, reading the papers with a tightening jaw. His wife reached for his arm, her eyes darting around, searching for Chase. Donna's legal team had delivered the notifications to every investor Chase had brought into Madeline's attic without her knowledge. A formal audit was now in place. All assets were frozen until an investigation into unauthorized transfers was complete. The South End Flats project would no longer have its quiet funding. I watched Chase from the shadows, the way his smile faltered as one of his groomsmen showed him the envelope, pointing toward the group now forming around his parents. Chase's hand tightened around his glass, his face paling as he scanned the growing unrest, the perfect facade of his wedding day cracking. Madeline noticed first, her smile fading as she turned toward the noise, her brows furrowing when she saw her new father-in-law's glare, the way guests began to back away from them, whispering. Chase leaned in, speaking quickly to her, but she pulled back, shaking her head, her eyes widening, searching the crowd until they landed on me. I stepped forward, letting the torchlight catch the calm on my face. Madeline broke away from Chase, the layers of her dress catching on the grass as she hurried toward me. Mama, what did you do? She demanded, her voice trembling, eyes bright with panic. I kept my gaze steady, meeting hers, seeing the fear there, the confusion, the betrayal she couldn't yet understand. "What I had to," I said softly. "You're ruining everything," she hissed, glancing over her shoulder as Chase stalked toward us, his jaw clenched, the perfect groom losing his composure. "No, Madeline," I replied, my voice calm, steady over the wind and the music. "I'm protecting you." Chase stopped a few feet away, his eyes cold, his hands clenched at his sides. "You think this changes anything, Linda?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you can stop what's coming?" I tilted my head, letting the sea breeze lift a strand of hair from my face. "I don't have to stop it," I said. "You already did." Behind him, his parents began moving toward us, their faces dark, the papers in their hands fluttering like white flags that promised war. Chase turned, seeing them, and for the first time fear crossed his face, quick and sharp before he masked it with anger. Madeline looked between us, her hand on her stomach, the tears building in her eyes as she realized she was caught in the middle of something she never saw coming. "Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, not today." I reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek, letting my hand linger for a moment. "You'll understand one day," I said softly. And then I stepped back, leaving her there as Chase's parents closed in, as the guests began to realize the perfect wedding was no longer perfect. I turned toward the ocean, the soft hiss of the waves calling me away, each step lighter as I moved toward the boardwalk, letting the wind carry the noise of the unraveling behind me. I didn't look back. Have you ever had to choose between peace and protecting the ones you love? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. They wanted me gone, but they would be the ones to disappear first. The notifications went out just as the cake was being rolled to the center of the reception. A towering white confection with fresh flowers, its beauty meaningless as phones across the crowd began to buzz. It started as a ripple, soft and confused, as people glanced at their screens, brows furrowing, mouths parting in confusion. Then the ripple became a wave, a rising tide of voices, questioning, demanding, sharp whispers cutting through the music. I stood near a palm torch, the warm light flickering across my thrift store dress, the ocean breeze lifting strands of hair around my face. I watched as the carefully crafted image of the perfect wedding began to crack. Chase's father, Mr. Thompson, was the first to react, pulling his phone closer to his face, his eyes narrowing as he read the legal notice. His wife leaned in her face, paling, one hand clutching her pearls. All boutique investors were notified that Madeline's attic was under immediate audit, accounts frozen, and an investigation into misappropriated funds was in process. The figure in question, $150,000, was no longer hidden in Chase's side project. People started turning toward Chase, who was standing near the bar with a glass in hand, smiling at a guest who was no longer listening. The guest stepped back, holding up the phone, showing him the email. Chase's smile fell. He tried to brush it off, laughing lightly, but the laughter died in his throat as more guests pulled out their phones, as the whispers turned into pointed questions. "What's going on, Chase? What is this email about the boutique? You said the funds were secure, Chase." Chase's eyes darted around, searching for Madeline, but she was already there, clutching his arm, her face pale. "What's happening?" she demanded, shaking him lightly, her voice breaking. "It's nothing." Chase snapped, pulling his arm free, his eyes locking on his father, who was now striding toward him, anger rolling off him like heat. "Chase, Mr. Thompson barked, holding up his phone. "What the hell have you done?" Guests backed away, forming a loose circle as the confrontation unfolded, the music still playing softly, a cruel background to the chaos. Madeline's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as she looked between her husband and his father, the truth clawing its way into her perfect day. "You told me it was an investment," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It is." Chase shot back, his eyes flashing. "It's under control." "It's not," Mr. Thompson roared, stepping closer, his face red, veins bulging at his neck. "You dragged our family into a fraud investigation on your damn wedding day." Chase tried to speak, but his mother grabbed her husband's arm, pulling him back, whispering urgently, her eyes darting around, realizing that everyone was watching. Madeline staggered back, shaking her head, the tears falling freely now, smudging her makeup, staining her perfect white dress. I stood quietly, letting the wind carry their voices to me, letting the pain settle in my chest, a dull ache. I accepted a price for the truth. Madeline turned, searching the crowd, and her eyes found mine. They were wide, desperate, begging for this to not be real. "Mama," she mouthed, her voice lost in the sound of the waves and the murmurs. I didn't move. She let out a soft sob, turning back to Chase, hitting his chest with her fists, crying, demanding answers he couldn't give her. He tried to grab her hands, but she pulled away, stumbling back, clutching her stomach, fear and confusion twisting her face. "Mr. Thompson," turned, looking directly at me, his eyes hard, filled with questions he would never dare to ask aloud. His wife pulled him back, whispering in his ear, but his gaze never left mine. The storm they had built was here, and they were the ones drowning in it. I watched as the last light of day slipped beneath the waves, the sky streaked in deep purple and soft gold, the air heavy with salt and tension. Guests began to scatter, gathering their purses, pulling shawls tighter, whispering as they moved away from Chase and his parents, who were now arguing in low, furious tones. Madeline stood alone, the train of her dress dragging in the sand, her hair coming loose around her face. She looked like a child again, small, and lost, her hands trembling as she tried to wipe the mascara from her cheeks. I wanted to run to her, to pull her into my arms, and promise her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't lie to her anymore. She turned and saw me standing by the tiki torch that flickered against the darkening sky, my face calm, the ocean crashing behind me. She took a step, then another, until she was close enough for me to see the freckles across her nose, the fear in her eyes. "Mama, please," she whispered, her voice breaking, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. "Tell me this isn't happening." I looked at her, taking in the dress, the makeup, the ring that still glittered on her finger. All the things she thought would protect her, all the things that meant nothing now. "It's happening," I said softly. Her lips quivered and she shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks again. "You don't understand, Mama," she cried. "I'm going to lose everything." I let out a slow breath, the cold breeze brushing against my skin, grounding me in this moment I had seen coming for months. "I know," I said. She took another step, her hands reaching for me, clutching at my arms, her eyes searching mine for a way out, for a mother's promise to fix it all. "You have to help me," she pleaded. "Please, Mama, I'll lose the boutique, the apartment, everything. I'll lose him." I felt her grip tighten, her nails digging into my skin, but I didn't flinch. "You're going to lose him anyway," I told her, my voice steady, quiet enough for only us to hear. She sobbed, falling forward, pressing her forehead against my shoulder, shaking with the force of it, her tears soaking through the fabric of my dress. "Mama, please," she choked out, her voice small, like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed at night. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her settle against me, letting the years of love and sacrifice fill the space between us. The memories of scraped knees and spelling tests, of laughter in small kitchens, of whispered dreams late at night. I placed my hands on her shoulders, gently pushing her back so I could see her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and pleading. "You have to let me help you the right way, Madeline," I said. "Not the way he wanted." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, just another sob that shook her body. She sank to her knees in the sand, her dress pooling around her, her hands gripping the fabric, her head bowed as she cried. "Please, Mama," she whispered so softly I could barely hear her over the waves. "I'll lose everything." I looked down at her, my heart breaking and healing all at once. Because this was the moment she finally understood, and I would not let her fall alone. Have you ever had to watch someone you love hit rock bottom to save them? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. This was no longer about $50,000. This was about dignity. The morning after the wedding, I asked Madeline to meet me at the boutique. The streets were quiet, the air sharp with early spring chill, the kind that made you pull your jacket tighter and keep your head down. Madeline arrived wearing oversized sunglasses, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her hands shaking as she unlocked the door. She didn't look at me as she stepped inside. I followed her in the soft scent of lavender and wood polish hitting me as the door shut behind us. The boutique was quiet, too quiet, the racks lined neatly, the sun catching the small crystals hanging in the window. "Mama, can we not do this now?" she said, her voice tired, breaking a little as she spoke. I looked around at the store she had built with my sacrifices, with my savings, with every overnight shift, and every skipped meal so she could have a shot at a life I never had. "Sit down, Madeline," I said, my voice calm. She hesitated, then sank into the chair behind the small checkout counter, her eyes fixed on the floor. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands as I pulled out the folder Donna had prepared. I placed it on the counter and opened it, letting her see the stack of papers, the highlighted transactions, the bank statements, the emails. "I need you to look at this," I said. She lifted her eyes, tears already forming, but she didn't reach for the papers. "I don't need to see it, Mama," she whispered. "I know." For a moment the air was heavy, the only sound the faint hum of the heater in the corner. "You know," I asked, my voice quiet. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I know he took the money. I know he used me." I felt something crack inside me, the anger and grief and love all mixing together in a way that made it hard to breathe. "I spent my life building this for you, Madeline," I said, my voice shaking. "I spent nights alone working until my hands bled so you could have something better. So you could be safe." She started to cry, her shoulders shaking, her hands covering her face. "I thought he loved me," she sobbed. "I thought he would help us grow." I swallowed, letting her words hang in the air, letting the truth settle in. "He loved what you could give him," I said. "Not who you are." The door opened behind us, and Chase walked in, the door chime jingling softly. He was dressed in a dark coat, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but his jaw was tight, his steps quick. "Linda, we need to talk," he said, pulling off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were cold and calculating. "There's nothing left to talk about," I replied. He glanced at Madeline, who couldn't look at him, then back at me, his lips curling into a forced smile. "You think you can ruin me with this little stunt?" he asked, nodding toward the papers. "You think you're untouchable?" I held his gaze, unblinking. "I think you stole from my daughter. And I think you're about to pay for it." He chuckled, but it was empty, his eyes flicking around the boutique. "I have lawyers, Linda. Friends who owe me favors. You really want to play this game with me?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Chase, the money you took can be traced back to Madeline's attic. The unauthorized transfers, the shell company tied to South End Flats. That's money laundering." His smile faltered just for a moment before he covered it with a sneer. "You wouldn't," he said. "I already have," I replied. Madeline looked up then, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and tired. "What do I need to do, Mama?" she asked, her voice small, breaking. I placed a clean copy of the ownership documents in front of her along with a pen. "You need to sign this," I said. "I'm taking back the boutique. I'm protecting what's ours." She stared at the paper, then at me, her hand trembling as she reached for the pen. "You think I'd stay silent forever, Madeline?" I asked softly. Her breath caught her eyes, meeting mine as the pen hovered above the paper, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. And in that moment she finally saw me. Madeline's hand trembled as she lowered the pen to the paper, the ink catching on the page as she signed her name. Chase took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Madeline, don't do this," he hissed. "You're making a mistake." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on me, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, but her hand didn't stop until the signature was complete. When she finished, she let the pen drop, the sound small but final as it hit the counter. Chase's face darkened, a vein pulsing at his temple as he looked between us, his hands balling into fists. "You think this changes anything?" he snapped. "You think you're safe now?" I held his gaze unflinching, letting him see the steel in my eyes. "It changes everything," I said quietly, "and you know it." He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the quiet boutique. "You think you're smarter than me," he said, stepping closer, trying to loom over me. "I have connections, Linda. Judges, attorneys, people who owe me." I tilted my head, letting a small, tired smile cross my lips. "Then I guess we'll see who they believe," I replied. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it up between us. "This has every transfer, every email you sent, every piece of evidence they'll need," I said. "And Donna has copies. So does my attorney." His eyes flickered to the drive, and for the first time I saw fear pass across his face before he quickly masked it with anger. "You wouldn't dare," he whispered. "I already have," I said. Madeline let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking as she realized the weight of the truth around her. "You used me," she choked out, turning to Chase. "You used my name, my dream, for your games." Chase reached for her arm, but she pulled back, shaking her head. "Don't touch me," she cried, backing away, her hand resting over her stomach, protecting the child she carried. "Madeline, listen." Chase started, his voice turning soft, that fake warmth returning. "Don't," she said, her voice hardening, a flash of strength breaking through the fear. "You've done enough." He stood there, breathing heavily, the anger twisting his face as he realized he had lost. I stepped forward, standing between them, my eyes never leaving his. "If you come near her or this boutique again, I will take everything to the DA," I said, my voice steady. "And you will answer for every dollar you stole." His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak, his eyes burning into mine before he finally turned, storming out of the boutique, the door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the soft hum of the heater and the sound of Madeline's quiet sobs. I turned to her, reaching out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "It's over now," I said softly. She shook her head, tears falling again. "No, Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's just beginning." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with fear and a small spark of hope. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small. I looked around the boutique, the place we had both sacrificed for the place that was finally ours again. I took a deep breath, meeting her eyes. "Now we rebuild," I said. But deep down I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of a fight that would test us both. Have you ever had to take everything back to protect what matters? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I gave my daughter everything. Now it was time to give myself a chance to live. I left the reception before the lights were taken down, before the flowers wilted in the salt air. The soft hush of the waves followed me as I stepped out of my shoes, holding them in one hand, letting my toes sink into the cool sand. The sun was setting, a smear of orange and pink over the water, the breeze warm against my skin. I walked along the shoreline, the cold water washing over my feet, pulling at the edges of my dress. I thought about everything I had given Madeline. Every overnight shift, every dollar tucked into savings, every birthday where I blew out candles alone so she could have another dance class, another book, another chance. And I thought about how easily she had almost let it slip away, chasing a man who saw her as a stepping stone, who thought he could erase me with a demand for $50,000. But he was gone now. And she was left to face the pieces, the truth, the world she had chosen. I didn't hate her for it. I let the water wash over my feet again, letting the cold clear the ache in my chest. I still loved her. But I wouldn't lose myself for her anymore. Weeks passed and the papers were signed, the ownership transferred fully back into my hands. Madeline stepped away from the boutique, trying to find her footing, her belly growing as the months passed, the reality of her choices settling around her like a heavy coat. She came by once, standing outside the boutique with tears in her eyes, her hand resting on her stomach, asking me if I could forgive her. I told her the truth. "I will always love you," I said. "But you need to learn who you are before you can come back." She nodded, wiping her tears, turning away with shoulders heavy but a small spark in her eyes that told me she was beginning to understand. When the right buyer came, I sold the boutique. I packed the memories of those walls, the laughter and the long nights into boxes, letting the door close softly behind me for the last time. I took that money and moved to Key West, renting a small shop on a quiet street lined with palm trees. I filled it with vintage dresses, handmade jewelry, old records that played softly while I worked. I opened the doors each morning, the ocean breeze sweeping in, the sun warm on my face. I met locals and travelers, people who stopped to chat, who told me their stories while they flipped through dresses and scarves. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't living for someone else. I was living for me. Have you ever had to walk away from everything to find yourself? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Most mornings in Key West, I opened the shop before sunrise, the air cool and quiet. I would brew a small pot of coffee, letting the rich scent fill the shop as I flipped the sign to open. The ocean was only a short walk away, and sometimes the smell of salt would drift in as I swept the floors, the light of dawn painting everything soft gold. I met people from everywhere, travelers with stories, locals who stopped in to browse or talk, women looking for a vintage dress that made them feel seen. And for the first time, I felt seen too. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in decades, standing behind that small counter wrapping dresses in brown paper, laughing with customers as we shared small pieces of our lives. I was no longer someone's mother, someone's employee, someone's silent backbone. I was Linda. And that was enough. One afternoon, as the ceiling fan hummed quietly and a Ray Charles record played low, my phone buzzed with a FaceTime request. I paused, wiping my hands on a soft cloth before picking up the phone. Madeline's face appeared on the screen, tired but glowing, tears shining in her eyes as she shifted the camera to show a small bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket. "He's here, Mama," she whispered. "His name is Noah." My breath caught, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Noah. My grandson. Madeline's eyes searched mine, fear and hope warring on her face, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to do this, Mama," she whispered. "I don't know how to be enough for him." I swallowed, letting the moment settle, letting the love rise up and wash away the hurt. "You already are," I said softly. "You just need to let yourself believe it." She began to cry, rocking Noah gently, his small face peaceful in the glow of the afternoon light. "Will you come see us?" she asked, her voice so small it nearly broke me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the shop, the sound of the waves outside, and the weight of everything we had survived settle in my chest. "Yes," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I will." She smiled, tears falling as she whispered, "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby," I replied. When the call ended, I stood there for a long time, letting the quiet wrap around me like a promise. I poured myself a cup of coffee, stepping outside into the warm breeze, the sun already low, turning the sky pink and purple. I took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through me as I lifted my face to the breeze, letting the salty air brush against my skin. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. I was ready. I took another sip, breathing in the ocean, letting the sunset glow on my skin, and smiled. Because I was finally free. Have you ever had to reclaim your life to truly live? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.